What if I told you that one stuttering shepherd once challenged the most powerful man on earth, and won? That he didn't use armies, politics, or gold, but something far more terrifying? Today we're diving into the most explosive confrontation in human history, where the fate of an entire nation hung in the balance, and nature itself became a weapon of war. Picture ancient Egypt at its zenith, golden pyramids piercing azure skies, the Nile flowing like liquid silver through emerald fields, the air thick with incense, and the sound of thousands of Hebrew slaves hauling massive stone blocks under the scorching sun. Their backs bent, their spirits crushed, their hope nearly extinguished after 4 centuries of bondage. But deep in the royal palace, paranoia was growing. Pharaoh had noticed something terrifying. These Hebrew slaves were multiplying faster than his own people. In the shadowy corridors of power, Pharaoh made a decision that would echo through eternity. Every Hebrew baby boy must die. Imagine the terror that gripped Hebrew mothers as Egyptian soldiers marched through their neighborhoods, the sound of their bronze armor clanking with each deadly step. Rivers ran red, not with plague, but with innocent blood. Yet in this darkest hour, 3 women would defy the most powerful empire on earth, a mother named Jochebed, her daughter Miriam, and surprisingly Pharaoh's own daughter. Picture this, a desperate mother weaving a basket with trembling hands, waterproofing it with tar and pitch, placing her 3-month-old son inside and setting him adrift on the crocodile-infested Nile. The irony is breathtaking. She was throwing her child into the very waters Pharaoh had designated as a graveyard for Hebrew babies. But sometimes, the greatest act of faith looks like absolute madness. That baby's name was Moses, and he was about to become Egypt's worst nightmare. But here's where the story takes an incredible turn. The basket didn't drift into oblivion. It floated straight into the hands of Pharaoh's daughter. Picture her shock as she opened that little ark and saw a Hebrew baby, knowing full well her father's death decree. In that moment, she faced a choice: obey her father's genocidal command, or risk everything to save one innocent life. She chose compassion, and unknowingly she had just adopted the future destroyer of her father's kingdom. Moses grew up in unimaginable luxury, eating from golden plates while his people ate scraps, sleeping on silk while they slept on stone floors. He received the finest education in mathematics, astronomy, military strategy, and statecraft. Ancient historians tell us he became a mighty warrior, leading Egyptian armies to victory. But deep in his heart, a question burned. Who am I really? The answer would transform him from prince to fugitive in a single moment of explosive rage. One scorching afternoon, Moses witnessed an Egyptian taskmaster brutally beating a Hebrew slave. Something snapped inside him. 40 years of suppressed identity, of living a lie, of watching his people suffer while he lived in luxury. It all erupted in a moment of white-hot fury. Moses killed the Egyptian and buried him in the sand. But someone saw. By the next day, word had reached Pharaoh, and the prince of Egypt became a wanted man with a death sentence on his head. Moses fled into the vast Sinai desert, from palace to wasteland, from prince to nobody. For 40 years, he tended sheep in the middle of nowhere, his royal education seemingly worthless, his destiny apparently derailed. The hot sand burned his feet where golden sandals once protected them. The blazing sun scorched his skin where fine linens once shielded him. He had time to think, to wrestle with his failures, to wonder if his life had any meaning at all. But God was preparing him for the greatest confrontation in human history. Then came the day that changed everything. Picture Moses climbing Mount Horeb with his flock when suddenly, impossibly, a bush erupted in flames but wasn't consumed. The fire danced and roared, yet the branches remained green, the leaves intact. As Moses stepped closer, mesmerized, a voice thundered from the flames, "Moses, take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground." The God of his fathers was about to give him the most impossible mission imaginable. The conversation that followed would terrify any rational person. God commanded Moses to return to Egypt, confront the most powerful ruler on earth, and demand the release of 2 million Hebrew slaves. Moses, now 80 years old and scarred by decades of failure, protested, "Who am I to do this? I can't even speak properly." But God's response was chilling. "I will be with you, and if Pharaoh refuses, I will strike Egypt with wonders so terrible that they will beg you to leave." The stage was set for an epic showdown. But first, God gave Moses a preview of the power he would wield. "Throw down your shepherd's staff," God commanded. When Moses obeyed, the wooden rod transformed into a writhing serpent, its scales glinting, its fangs bared. Moses jumped back in terror. Then God said, "Pick it up by the tail," the most dangerous part of any snake. The moment Moses grasped it, it became a staff again. This was just the beginning of the supernatural arsenal God was placing in his hands. The journey back to Egypt must have felt like walking toward his own execution. Moses knew he was returning to a land where he was still wanted for murder, to face a Pharaoh who commanded the loyalty of millions, protected by the most advanced military on earth. But he wasn't going alone. His brother Aaron, the eloquent speaker, would be his mouthpiece. Together, these two elderly men were about to challenge an empire and demand the impossible. The throne room of Pharaoh was a monument to human ego, towering golden statues, walls carved with scenes of military victories, the air heavy with the scent of frankincense and power. When Moses and Aaron entered, their simple shepherd's robes contrasted sharply with the opulent grandeur surrounding them. Pharaoh sat on his golden throne draped in the finest linen, his false beard and crown glittering with precious stones. The confrontation began with 5 words that would shake the foundations of the world. "Let my people go." Pharaoh's laughter echoed through the throne room like thunder. "Who is this God of yours that I should obey him?" he sneered. "I don't know your God, and I certainly won't let Israel go." But his mockery quickly turned to stunned silence when Aaron threw down his staff and it became a serpent. Pharaoh called for his magicians and they replicated the miracle. But then something unprecedented happened. Aaron's serpent staff devoured all of theirs, leaving only one snake writhing on the marble floor before transforming back into a wooden rod. Instead of releasing the Hebrews, Pharaoh made their lives even more miserable. No more straw would be provided for making bricks. They had to gather it themselves while maintaining the same impossible quotas. Hebrew taskmasters were beaten when quotas weren't met, and the people turned on Moses with bitter words. "You've made us stink in Pharaoh's nostrils. You've put a sword in their hands to kill us." Moses had expected miracles, but instead found himself more hated than ever. Little did anyone know that this was all part of a larger, terrifying plan. Then God unleashed the first plague, and Egypt began its descent into nightmare. The Nile River, source of life, prosperity, and divine power, turned to blood. Not metaphorical blood, not reddish water, but actual blood so thick and putrid that fish died en masse, washing up on shores in rotting heaps. The stench was unbearable. Egyptians dug frantically along the riverbanks, desperate for clean water. But Pharaoh's magicians duplicated this wonder too, and his heart remained unmoved. He had no idea that 9 more catastrophes were heading his way, each worse than the last. The plagues that followed read like something from humanity's worst nightmares. Frogs covered every surface, in beds, in ovens, in kneading bowls, croaking and dying in massive, slimy heaps until the land reeked of decay. Then came gnats so thick they darkened the sky, followed by flies that made life unbearable. Livestock died in the fields, their bloated carcasses rotting under the sun. Boils erupted on every Egyptian from the lowest slave to Pharaoh himself, their skin burning with infected sores. But here's what makes this even more incredible. None of these plagues touched the Hebrew people in Goshen. The 7th plague brought terror from the sky. Hailstones the size of boulders crashed down with supernatural fury, each one wrapped in fire that didn't extinguish on impact. The crops were destroyed, trees were shattered, and anyone caught outside was killed instantly. Lightning zigzagged continuously across the sky, creating a hellish light show that had never been seen before. For the first time, Pharaoh seemed to crack. "I have sinned! Your God is righteous, and I and my people are wicked!" But when the storm ended, his heart hardened again. Then came the 8th plague, locusts in numbers that defied comprehension. They rose from the desert like a living mountain, their wings creating a sound like rushing water, mixed with the roar of a wildfire. They devoured everything the hail had spared, stripping trees bare, consuming every blade of grass, every grain of wheat, until the land looked like a moonscape. Egypt, the breadbasket of the ancient world, faced starvation. Even Pharaoh's own servants begged him, "How long will this man be a snare to us? Don't you realize Egypt is ruined?" But Pharaoh's pride had become his prison. The ninth plague plunged Egypt into supernatural darkness, not ordinary night, but a thick, tangible blackness that could be felt, that pressed against the skin like velvet chains. For 3 days, no one could see their hand in front of their face. No one could move from where they sat. Fires wouldn't burn properly. Oil lamps flickered and died. The darkness was so complete, so oppressive that it felt like being buried alive. Yet in the Hebrew settlements, there was light. The contrast couldn't have been more stark or more ominous for what was coming next. After the darkness lifted, Moses delivered the most chilling warning in human history. "At midnight, I will go throughout Egypt, and every firstborn son will die. From the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on the throne to the firstborn of the slave girl at the handmill, and all the firstborn of the cattle as well." But for the Hebrew families who followed God's precise instructions, slaughtering a perfect lamb, painting its blood on their doorposts, and staying inside until dawn, the angel of death would pass over their homes. At exactly midnight, across the length and breadth of Egypt, a wail arose like nothing ever heard before or since. In one night, the mightiest empire on earth was brought to its knees by the death of every firstborn son. Pharaoh's own heir lay dead in the palace, the prince who would never become king, the dreams that would never be fulfilled, the futures that would never unfold. Moses had kept his word. God had struck Egypt with wonders so terrible that they begged the Hebrews to leave, loading them down with gold and silver just to get them out. 2 million slaves walked free, and the Red Sea would soon part to seal their victory forever. This is what happens when ordinary people partner with an extraordinary God. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see more impossible stories that change the world, and ring the bell because you won't want to miss what we're covering next. Before you go, if these biblical stories have touched your heart, please consider supporting us on Patreon. There you'll find exclusive content, early access to new videos, and so much more. The link is right in the video description. Thank you, and God bless you.